This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. Go to the link in the description below so they know that I sent you. Hello everyone, I'm Nitsuhon, and today I'm bringing you my picks for the best commons and uncommons in each color for War of the Spark Limited. Over the last week I've given my thoughts on every single card in War of the Spark in my limited set review, and today I'm sort of doing a Cliff's Notes version of that, just in case you don't have time to watch through like 5 hours of video about all the cards in the set before the pre-release. Alright, let's get started by looking at white. So I think the third best white uncommon is the Wanderer. This is a card that I think I've come up on even just since my set review. There are a lot of ways to do damage to creatures in this format with removal spells, and those are all going to be negated. This format's going to have more creatures that are targetable by the -2 than usual because of all the +1/+1 counters. And while I don't think I'd be thrilled about first picking the Wanderer, I think there are a lot worse things you could end up first picking. I just think overall it's going to do a lot of work, and I like it as the third best white uncommon. I think the second best white uncommon is Gideon's Triumph. This kind of card can be sort of tricky because it is conditional. Your opponent has to be either attack or block with something for you to kill it. If they're only doing it with one thing and it's their best thing, then Gideon's Triumph is pretty easy to make work. But it's also worth noting and remembering that the way this is worded, they don't have to be actually actively attacking or blocking. They just have to have attacked or blocked this turn. So you can wait to use it until after you block in combat and kill one of their other attackers. And then use Gideon's Triumph to maybe kill their best attacker. You know, it does have to hit you first, or maybe you chump blocked it. But I think the efficiency here is worth it because you're going to trade up with this a lot. Pay only 2 mana to kill something much, much larger. I think the best white uncommon is really not up for debate. I think it's just Prison Realm. It can deal with either creatures or planeswalkers, which are by far the most common permanent types in this format. And it even scries 1, so why not? But I don't think I would be thrilled about first picking the Wanderer or maybe even Gideon's Triumph, but Prison Realm is a great first pick. I do think all 3 of these will probably happen at some point in the format in some weaker packs, but Prison Realm is going to be first pickable in a lot of packs that you see it in. Now let's look at the 3 best white commons. So I think the third best white common is Trusted Pegasus. We've seen a card like this a lot lately that can attack and give something else flying. They tend to be really good because they give you not only an evasive source of damage in and of themselves, but also they can make one of your other creatures evasive. It's also got decent stats, like a 3 mana 2/2 of flying would be playable anyway, but in addition to that, it can do some serious work by giving some of your best creatures flying. I think the second best white common is Wanderer's Strike. It kills anything for 5 mana, which isn't the most efficient, but it doesn't ask any questions, and that's nice. And it has Proliferate attack to it, and obviously there's going to be a lot of counters in this format, +1/+1 counters, loyalty counters primarily, and adding those to your permanents that already have them is going to be pretty good. And I think the best white common is Law-Rune Enforcer. It's just, every time we see one of these effects that's efficiently costed, they're incredibly good, just like Master Decoy, sort of the original version of this effect. And sure, it can't tap down like tokens. It can't tap down the big armies, and that's kind of a problem. But I think, other than that, it's going to be incredible. And even against decks with an army, you're going to be kind of okay with the fact that you can't tap them down because you can tap down probably all of their other creatures. It's essentially a 1 mana removal spell that you can sort of pay to remove a creature every turn. It's good on offense. It's good on defense. It's just a great card. I think all 3 of these are also commons that you end up first picking sometimes, but I think Law-Rune Enforcer is the only one you're really excited about. And then, to a lesser extent for Wanderer's Strike and Trusted Pegasus. Now let's move into Blue's uncommons. I think Blue's third best uncommon is Rescuer Sphinx. I think we're going to see that the top 2 blue uncommons are both incredibly good, but I think picking a third best blue uncommon wasn't super easy. They're all kind of okay, but nothing special. And Rescuer Sphinx is the one in the end that I decided to put into this video. It's a 4 mana 3/2 flyer at worst, which is a decent floor, but it can also do some synergistic things. You can return planeswalkers to your hand with it, so you can reset their loyalty and use their minus abilities again. You can return a creature with the Enter the Battlefield ability to your hand when you play it. You can return a creature who has an aura-based removal spell on it when you play it, and that also makes it bigger, which is great. But I do think, probably half the time you're not going to bounce anything. So in those cases, it's certainly nothing special. And I don't really want to be first picking Rescuer Sphinx, I don't think. Now, as I said, the top 2 blue uncommons, I had a hard time picking which one was first, which one was second. I'm sure that will be figured out once we play the format a bunch. But that's because there's two really, really good uncommons. So I think the second best blue uncommon is Kasmina, Enigmatic Mentor. She has a nice static ability that makes removal spells harder for your opponent to use, and she has a great loyalty ability, wherein she can make wizard creature tokens that also loot. Generally, if you can get 2 wizard tokens out of her, you're going to be in business. I mean, that's just great. 4 mana. Imagine if this were 4 mana, make 2/2/2 blue wizard tokens, and then, draw a card, discard a card for each one. That would be an insane card. It's not quite what it is because you have to wait a turn, but it also has the additional upside of if you proliferate, well, you can do it yet again. And so Kasmina is really, really good. She may just be the best uncommon planeswalker in the set. She's certainly in the conversation. I have, for now, as the best blue uncommon, Eternal Skylord. Again, I could see these two switching places. They're both incredibly good. Eternal Skylord makes a token when it comes into play, an army token, and it has flying. So you're paying 5 for 5/5 worth of stats, and that's a great deal. 2/2 of it has flying, and on top of that, if you already had an army in play and you're giving it flying and +2/+2, you're going to be in really good shape. So both of those are cards I'd be pretty happy to first pick. I think they're even both worth splashing, potentially, as strong as they are. So now let's look at blue's commons. So blue at common, I think, it has more depth. I don't think it has as much power, but it's got more depth. So I think the third best blue common is Callous Dismissal. The way I've been thinking about this card is that a good chunk of the time for 2 mana, you play a 1/1 that bounces a permanent to its owner's hand, which is a good card. It's like the bounce effects we've seen in the past. It's not always going to do that. Sometimes it'll just give something +1/+1, which is less valuable. But when you're also attaching the ability to bounce an on-land permanent to it, well, that's pretty good. Aven Eternal also has a mass. It's another creature that just gives you really efficient stats. It's a 3 mana 2/2 with flying that makes a 1/1, and that would be great in any format. Again, not always going to make a 1/1, but it's always going to give you some sort of value, whether it puts a +1/+1 counter on a creature on your army, or whether it makes a 1/1 itself. And then I think the best blue common, although I've come down on it a little bit as I think more about this format, is Kasmina's Transmutation. In this format, loaded with +1/+1 counters and armies and the like, Kasmina's Transmutation is going to have some issues, but I think it's nice that it blanks so many cards in the format, turning off static abilities or activated abilities too. And I think in the end that does still make it the best blue common. I think all three of these are solid. I think I would probably only be happy first picking Kasmina's Transmutation or Aven Eternal, though. Now let's look at black. I think the third best black uncommon is Dreadmalkin. A 1 mana 1/1 with Menace is nothing special, but that's sort of the baseline here. Then you can start adding counters to this thing. You can really threaten people with it. They're going to fear the activation a lot of the time, and they're just going to take damage from it. And as it gets larger, just taking damage for it's going to be more of a pain. The black-red deck especially looks like it's going to be good at sacrificing, and Dreadmalkin will be right at home there. I think the black-white deck, to a lesser extent, will be doing that as well. It's just a really nice card. I don't think you want to first pick it, but I do think it's pretty nice, and it's going to be a key card in some decks in this format. Next, I have Eternal Taskmaster, who couples the fact that he has good stats with the ability to just bring cards back from your graveyard, creature cards back from your graveyard, which is pretty great. It's the kind of thing your opponent has to block and try to kill, and you can really exploit that by using a combat trick potentially, because if you get to do this more than once, your opponent's just going to be in a world of hurt. Even if you only do it once, you're going to be in really good shape. So I think you do want to first pick it. And I think the best black uncommon is Bleeding Edge, another card with a mass, but it's also a removal spell. And because of all of that, it can allow you to get a 2-for-1. It's not an instant speed spell, but it does let you give something -2/-2 until end of turn, so you can kill a smaller creature, and then you get a 2/2, or +2/+2 to your army already in play. Getting the 2/2 is a little more valuable, probably, because then you can trade it for a creature. But if you also just make your army large enough that it can effectively block or attack, that's good value too. I just think the fact that overall this is sort of giving you, in a way, 4/4 worth of stats for 3 mana is a pretty good deal. And I think that makes it the best black uncommon in the set. It is unfortunate it's double black, so you can't splash it, but I still think you first pick it most of the time when you see it. Now let's look at black's commons. Black has a bunch of good removal spells at common, and as we'll see, I think all three of their best commons are removal spells. For instance, Sorin's Thirst, which for 2 mana does 2 to something and you gain 2 life. The one thing that holds it back for me from being like a snap first pick or an easy first pick in some packs is its mana cost, because, In Limited, your mana is not so good. You may not be used to that if you were playing Guilds of Ravnica or Ravnica Allegiance, and that's when you started playing Limited, but your mana tends to not be very good. And generally, you want to be able to play Sorin's Thirst early, ideally, and having double black early is far from a guarantee in Limited. But it's still good enough that it makes this list. It's still a nice spell. I don't think you cut it from black decks. I'm just saying it is held in check by its more challenging mana cost than the other two cards we're going to look at. For instance, Spark Harvest, which allows you to destroy a creature or a planeswalker. You can pay 5 mana for it, 3 black for it, which is a pretty good fail case, paying 5 for this to kill a creature or planeswalker. But you can also just sacrifice a creature, and that is a pretty good way to decrease the cost. And as we've already said, black-red and black-white both look like they're going to be very interested in sacrificing, but I think Spark Harvest will be good in any deck. And then I think the best black common is probably just the best common in the whole set, and it's Ob Nixilis' Cruelty, which is probably better than most uncommons in this set. For 3 mana, it gives -5/-5 at instant speed, and it exiles things that die. It's even better than the Amass removal spell we looked at. That's the best uncommon. That just shows you how powerful it is for a common, that it's better than all the uncommons. So that's something to keep in mind with black. But yeah, I think Spark Harvest and Cruelty are things you feel fine about first picking, or good, actively good. Sorin's Thirst, not so much, but it is going to be, you'll play 2 copies of it in every black deck and feel pretty good about it. Right, now let's move to red. I think the third best red uncommon is Jaya, Venerated Fire Mage. She has a static ability that actually matters, and she's a removal spell. And if you can couple those two things, you've got a pretty good card. Her static ability will make it so your red creatures or any red source do additional damage, except for herself. Keep that in mind. And that's kind of nice because it makes it harder for your opponent to block. It can just shake up combat right away, even if Jaya just lets you attack with 1 more creature, because now your opponent, the best they can do is trade, or it makes your 1 burn spell do 1 more damage. That's going to be incredible a lot of the time, especially when it's attached to a creature that can kill a couple small creatures or burn the opponent for 4, after you play it on turn 5. And again, if you proliferate or do other things, you can potentially use her ability more than twice. But she's frequently going to be a 2-for-1 that also happens to make your board state better a significant portion of the time. Next, I have Dreadhorde Twins. It's another one of these creatures that amasses and then gives a keyword ability. It's another really efficient creature because for 4 mana, you get 4/4 worth of stats. 2/2 of it has trample. And if you are, in the case of these amass cards, sometimes I think already having the army in play, or maybe always having an army in play already, is going to be best with them. If you give your army flying, if you're giving it +2/+2 in flying and you get a huge creature in the air, that's going to be better than just making a 2/2 with flying. Same thing with Dreadhorde Twins. If you already have a 3/3 in play and you just made it a 5/5 with trample, by adding this to the board, you're going to be in pretty good shape. So it's a really good uncommon as well. And then there's Chandra's Triumph, which is just a really efficient source of 3 damage. It can hit planeswalkers, which is nice in this format. Also, Chandra's only at rare and not at mythic rare, so the chances of actually pulling this off at some point aren't 0. Overall, I think all 3 of these are first pickable, and you feel pretty good about it. Obviously, Chandra's Triumph is the most exciting, followed by Dreadhorde Twins and then Jaya. In terms of red commons, I think the third best one is Spellgorger Weird. This may be my own bias because I really love spell decks, but this seems like a pretty easy build around. Your deck, even if you don't really try, is going to have enough non-creature spells in it, 4 to 6, that playing Spellgorger Weird is fine. But if you really build around it and end up in the blue-red spells deck, which looks like the most spell-heavy deck in the format, then you're going to be really in business, and it's just going to become a win condition for you. So it is a build around, and I don't think I would want to first pick it. And I hope I don't ever do that, but it has so much upside that doing it wouldn't be the end of the world. As we'll see, the other 2 best red commons are really good spells that will obviously pair well with Spellgorger Weird, such as Chandra's Pyrohelix, a card we've seen before, be really good. It can be a 2-for-1 against smaller creatures. It can also hit your opponent, which is always nice. You can kill, do one opponent's creature and do 1 to them. The flexibility of hitting opponents is pretty nice in general because sometimes that's the reach you need. And, a lot of the times it's just going to kill an X2. But if that's your fail case, then you're in pretty good shape. And then there's Jaya's Greeting, which I think is a great common. Does 3 to a creature for 2 mana at instant speed, just like Chandra's Triumph. But it can't hit planeswalkers. That's really the only difference between the two. And that Jaya's Greeting has Scry 1. So, you know, they're very similar cards. One's common, one's uncommon. But they're both really, really good removal spells. Premium removal spells that I think you first pick most of the time when you see them. Right now, let's move to our last color, which is green. I think the third best green uncommon is Evolution Sage. Between being a reasonable creature with, you know, stats-wise and mana cost-wise, and the fact that it has powerful, repeatable Proliferate, and it's in green, a color that's going to love Proliferate, especially in green, white, and blue-green decks. And as a result, you know, it can make your planeswalkers stick around longer. It can make your creatures bigger. It's going to do a lot of work. And again, its fail case is that it's a 3-mana 3/2. So even if you never proliferate with it, you know, your opponent probably has to use a removal spell on it or trade with it. And that's a 1-for-1 in your fail case, so that's not too bad. I think the second best green uncommon is Challenger Troll. It's hard to deal with in any combat situation because it can only be blocked by one creature, and it's huge and efficient. On top of that, it gives your other big creatures the same ability that they can only be blocked by one creature, and that's really, really good. Then there is Paradise Druid, which is a powerful mana creature with decent stats, and the thing I love the most about it, and if you've heard me say this earlier in the week with all my other set review stuff, I'm sorry, but I'm going to say it again. The fact is, a lot of times with mana dorks, you don't ever get to, you don't necessarily get to actually add the mana because your opponent kills it right away with a cheap removal spell, right? Paradise Druid makes sure you get the mana. So she is like a much more reliable source of fixing and ramp than your average mana dork, and she has decent stats overall. All three of these are first pickable. I could see maybe all three of them being shuffled around, but I do think they're the three best green uncommons. There's a chance Proliferate's even better than I expect, or maybe that ramp and fixing isn't going to be quite as exciting as I think it is, but these are great uncommons. I think green is the most stacked color in terms of its commons and uncommons in this format in general. So yeah, that's good news for green. Then let's look at commons, the three best green commons. I think the third best one is Bloom Hulk. Just an efficient creature with Proliferate. It's really efficient, especially in limited. A 4-mana 4/4 that is also going to potentially add counters to things is great. Centaur Nurturer, another source for green decks to add mana of any color. I really like this card because I feel like it does a lot for its mana cost. You know, 4-mana 2/4 isn't ideal, but it is a card that sees play sometimes in limited formats. Then this gains you life, and it adds mana of any color. If it did just one of those things, it would be good enough to be a good card, or at least a solid card limited. It does all of those things, and that makes it a good card, and I think you do feel fine about first picking it. And then I think the best green common is Band Together, which is one of these effects where your creatures do damage to one of your opponents. It is not a fight effect, and that makes it really good because your creatures get to do damage and not be damaged themselves. On top of that, it's instant speed, which makes it so that it's easier to find a window where you don't necessarily get blown out. I think both Band Together and Centaur Nurturer are cards you feel fine about first picking. Bloom Hulk, probably not so much, but you know, it's all right. So those are my picks for now for the best commons and uncommons in each color in the set. Let me know what you think the best picks are in each color in this set. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. And if you want to see more War of the Spark limited content, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to see all my other War of the Spark content I've already made, you can see a playlist for it on your screen here in a few seconds. Thanks for watching.